The myth of the human warriors. The battlefield burned under an alien sky. Smoke rose from the wreckage of destroyed machines, and the cries of the wounded echoed through the valley. Commander Ziyara stood tall, her golden armor gleaming under the twin suns of Vargas 9. Her people, the Dravens, were warriors, unstoppable, undefeated, unchallenged. For centuries, the Draven Empire had crushed every species that stood in its way. Humans were no different. They were a weak, scattered race, barely surviving on the edges of space. In Draven history, humans were not even considered real warriors. They were myths, stories told to scare young soldiers. Ziyara believed the stories were nonsense. She had fought many battles, and she had never once seen a human warrior. To her, humans were no more dangerous than insects, small, fragile, and easily crushed. But that belief was about to change. The impossible warrior. The battle on Vargas 9 was supposed to be an easy victory. Draven forces had invaded the planet, expecting weak resistance from a few rebel aliens. But something was wrong. Her soldiers were losing. Ziyara narrowed her eyes as she watched from the ridge. A single figure moved through the battlefield. Fast, precise, deadly. He was not Draven. He was not part of the rebels. He was human. Ziyara's breath caught in her throat. It couldn't be. The warrior wore no heavy armor, only a dark combat suit that clung to his muscular form. He moved like a shadow, dodging plasma fire with inhuman speed. His blade, a strange curved weapon, sliced through Draven soldiers like they were nothing. Ziyara had never seen anything like it. She watched as one of her best fighters, General Torvak, charged at the human. Torvak was massive, nearly twice the size of the human. His armor was reinforced with plasma shielding, making him almost indestructible. The human warrior didn't hesitate. He sidestepped the charge in one smooth motion, a flash of silver. A single strike. Torvak fell, dead. The battlefield fell silent. The Draven soldiers hesitated. Fear crept into their eyes. Humans were supposed to be weak. Then why was one human killing them all? The eyes of a predator. Ziyara felt something she had never felt before. Uncertainty. She clenched her fists and activated her communicator. Hold the line. He is only one. Kill him. Her soldiers obeyed. Plasma rifles lit up the battlefield, turning the air into a storm of energy blasts. The human didn't run. He moved. Ziyara's sharp eyes followed his movements. It was unnatural. He weaved between energy bolts with terrifying precision. His reactions were too fast. His body shifted before the shots were even fired. It was as if he could predict their attacks. Within seconds, he reached the front lines. Then the real slaughter began. Draven warriors were powerful. Their armor was nearly indestructible. Their training was the best in the galaxy. But against this human, none of that mattered. His blade cut through armor like paper. His movements were like a ghost's, appearing, striking, and disappearing before his enemies could react. Ziyara watched, frozen. What is he? Then, suddenly, he turned. Their eyes met across the battlefield. Ziyara's blood turned to ice. The human's eyes were like nothing she had ever seen before. Cold, focused, merciless. He did not look at her like an enemy. He looked at her like a hunter watching prey. A shiver ran down her spine. For the first time in her life, Commander Ziyara felt fear. The hunter speaks. The human slowly stepped forward, his blade still dripping with alien blood. Ziyara raised her plasma rifle. She was a warrior. She did not fear myths. But before she could fire, the human spoke. His voice was calm, confident, too confident. You don't have to die for a war you've already lost. Ziyara's mind raced. What did he mean? The Draven Empire was the most powerful force in the galaxy. Humans were extinct, weren't they? But as she looked at the battlefield, the bodies of her fallen warriors, the unstoppable human, the fear in her own soldiers' eyes, she realized something terrible. The stories were wrong. Humans were not weak. They were not myths. They were monsters. The beginning of the end. Ziyara had a choice. She could order her remaining forces to attack, but deep down, she knew it would not change anything. This human was different. He was something else. The warrior slowly lowered his blade, his eyes never leaving hers. He was waiting for her decision. Ziyara took a slow breath. For the first time in her life, she didn't know what to do. The myths had come to life, and they were just getting started. The unstoppable warrior. The battlefield smelled of burnt metal and scorched flesh. Plasma bolts still flickered in the air, but most of the fighting had stopped. Draven soldiers, once fearless warriors, stood frozen, staring at the lone human who had torn through their ranks like a storm. Commander Ziyara's heart pounded. This was not how battles were supposed to go. A single warrior should not have been able to do this. The Dravens were the superior race, conquerors of dozens of worlds. And yet here she stood, facing the impossible. The human had no armor like the Dravens, no energy shields, no reinforcements. And still, he stood. His black combat suit was torn in places, revealing scarred skin beneath. His blade, now slick with green Draven blood, rested loosely in his hand. But his eyes were locked onto hers. Not with fear, not with anger, but with something worse. Calculating. The battle resumes. Ziyara clenched her fists. She would not let fear control her. She was Draven. She was born for war. Attack him. Now, she barked. The moment the words left her lips, the human moved. Ziyara barely had time to see him vanish. 1 second, he was standing still. The next, a Draven warrior screamed as the human appeared behind him, blade slicing cleanly through his armor. Another soldier fired, but the human was already gone. Impossible. Ziyara fired her own weapon, aiming directly at his chest. Her plasma shot should have been a killing blow, but it never hit. He twisted midair, dodging the blast like he had seen it coming before she even fired. Ziyara's breath caught. No one is that fast. The human sprinted across the battlefield, cutting through her troops like a ghost of war. No hesitation, no wasted movement. One Draven after another fell, their bodies hitting the ground before they even realized they were dead. Her best warriors, trained since childhood, were dying in seconds. The duel. Ziyara knew one thing. If she didn't stop him now, none of them would leave this battlefield alive. She activated her wrist blades, twin energy weapons humming with deadly plasma. She was one of the best Draven fighters in the Empire. The human stopped. He tilted his head, as if studying her. For the first time since the battle started, he spoke. Finally, someone worth fighting. Ziyara growled. She launched herself forward, faster than any normal soldier. She struck first, her wrist blades slicing toward his chest, but he was already moving. He ducked, spun. Before she could react, he was behind her. A cold chill ran down her spine. He's faster than me. She barely turned in time to block his blade. The force shook her entire body. The human was strong. Too strong. Ziyara gritted her teeth. She was a warrior. She would not fall so easily. She twisted, aiming for his throat. He sidestepped like he saw it coming before she even moved. Then, with a swift motion, he kicked her in the chest. Ziyara flew backward, hitting the ground hard. For the first time, pain exploded in her ribs. She had never been knocked down before. Her vision blurred for a second. When she looked up, the human was already standing over her. His blade was at her throat. The battle was over. Ziyara froze. Her breathing was heavy, her body aching. She had lost. A silence stretched between them. Then, to her shock, the human stepped back. He lowered his weapon. He let her live. Ziyara stared, confused. Why? Why don't you finish it? The human met her gaze, unblinking. Because your real enemy isn't me. Her blood ran cold. What does that mean? She knew humans were dangerous, but this warrior, was unlike anything she had ever faced. And now he was walking away. The mystery of the human warrior. Ziyara pushed herself up, ignoring the pain in her ribs. Her remaining soldiers stood frozen, unsure whether to fight or run. She glared at them. Stand down. The human warrior had already disappeared into the smoke of the battlefield, his impossible speed carrying him away. Ziyara knew she couldn't let him go. She had to find him again. Who was he? Where did he come from? How did one human defeat an entire Draven force? A sinking feeling filled her chest. The Dravens had always believed they were the strongest race in the galaxy. But today, she had learned a terrifying truth. Humans were not myths. They were warriors. And this war was far from over. The search for the human warrior. The battlefield was silent now. The human was gone. Commander Ziyara stood in the ruins, staring at the empty space where he had disappeared into the smoke. Her Draven soldiers, the once feared warriors of the Empire, stood around her in stunned silence. They had lost. To one man, a human. Ziyara clenched her fists. This wasn't over. She would find him. She had to. Because if humans like him existed, then everything the Dravens believed about their superiority was a lie. And that was something she could not accept. The hunt begins. Ziyara stormed into her command tent. The holographic war table flickered, displaying reports of the battle. She ignored the casualty numbers. Her focus was on one thing: the human warrior. She activated the battlefield recordings, her sharp eyes scanning every frame of the footage. She needed to understand. Frame by frame, she watched the fight unfold. His movements were unnatural. His reaction speed was impossibly fast. He dodged plasma fire before it was even fired. That wasn't just training. That was something else. Her second-in-command, General Tsiren, stepped forward. He was bruised, still recovering from his own encounter with the human. His voice was bitter. One man did this. One human. How is that possible? Ziyara's jaw tightened. I don't know, but I will find out. Tsiren shook his head. Humans are extinct. They've been extinct for decades. The Empire crushed them. There's no way one could survive alone. Ziyara turned to him, eyes cold. Then explain what we saw today. Tsiren had no answer. Neither did she. But she would find one. The forbidden records. Ziyara needed answers, and she knew where to find them. Deep within the Draven War archives, hidden from most commanders, were records of past wars. Wars that were never spoken about. Wars that ended too suddenly. She traveled to the heart of the Empire, bypassing security clearances that even high-ranking officials would never dare to override. The archives were ancient, stretching deep beneath the Imperial Palace. Rows of holographic records flickered, untouched for years. She searched for one thing: the last human war. When she found the files, a cold feeling crawled up her spine. The war had been short, too short. The official records claimed that humanity was wiped out, but something didn't make sense. The battle reports were incomplete. Details were missing. Entire battles were classified. And then, she found something even more disturbing. The final entry. A single redacted message from the Supreme Command of the Draven Empire. Ziyara accessed it. The screen flashed a warning. Classified. Imperial access only. She entered the highest clearance code she had. The file opened. She read the words slowly, each one burning into her mind. The war did not end in victory. It ended in silence. Humanity was not destroyed. They disappeared. We did not win. They let us believe we won. Ziyara's hands clenched. Lies. Everything the Empire had taught them about the war was a lie. Humans were never defeated. They had gone into hiding. And now, they were coming back. She exhaled slowly, her pulse racing. This warrior, the one she fought, He wasn't the last. There were more. She had to find them, before it was too late. The chase across the stars. Ziyara ordered a stealth ship, one of the fastest in the fleet. Her mission was not sanctioned by the Empire. She didn't care. The warrior had disappeared into the wastelands of Argus 9, but she knew he didn't come from there. She needed to find where he was truly hiding. Her search took her across the stars. She hunted through abandoned colonies, ghost ships left drifting in deep space, ancient battlefields where the wreckage of human and Draven ships still floated. She interrogated mercenaries, war criminals, smugglers, anyone who might have heard rumors of a ghost warrior. Most laughed at her. Humans are extinct. They never fought back. But some whispered different things. They spoke of strange disappearances, ships vanishing without a trace, military outposts falling silent overnight. And always, they mentioned the same thing. The lone warrior, a shadow in the night, a ghost. Ziyara followed every lead, pushing deeper into the forgotten corners of the galaxy. Until, finally, she found something. Or rather, something found her. The trap. Her ship drifted over a barren moon. A distress signal had drawn her there. A simple message. Help us. Under attack. It had to be a human signal. She landed in the dark canyon, stepping into the cold silence. Her elite warriors followed, weapons drawn. The ruins were ancient, covered in dust and shadows. Then, movement. Figures emerged from the darkness. Not humans. Draven mercenaries. Ziyara's stomach dropped. It was a trap. Blaster fire erupted. Her warriors fought back, but the enemy had the advantage. They were pinned down, outnumbered. And then, it happened. A shadow moved in the darkness. The Draven mercenaries barely had time to scream. A blur of motion, a flash of silver. One by one, they fell, silent, precise, deadly. And then he was there. The human warrior. Jack Carter. He stood on the high ground, his dark armor blending into the night. His blade dripped with blood. Ziyara locked eyes with him again. This time, she wasn't afraid. She was ready. I need answers, human. Jack tilted his head, considering her. Then, finally, he spoke. Then you came to the wrong place. The next second, he vanished into the night. And Ziyara knew. The real war was only beginning. The forbidden truth. The desert wind howled across the ruins, kicking up dust and ash as Commander Ziyara stared into the darkness where Jack Carter had disappeared. He was gone. Again. But this time, she wasn't letting him escape. Her chest rose and fell with sharp breaths. Her heart pounded, not from fear, but from determination. This human was more than just a warrior. He was a ghost of history, a living contradiction. And now, she had a name. Jack Carter. It wasn't enough. She needed to know who he really was, where he came from, and most importantly, how many more like him were out there. The unspoken fear. Ziyara and her soldiers returned to the stealth ship. Her warriors were still shaken. Some refused to speak. General Tsaran, his armor stained with the blood of fallen mercenaries, stepped beside her. His voice was low. You saw him again, didn't you? Ziyara nodded. Tsaran exhaled, shaking his head. This is madness. Chasing a single human across the stars. What do you hope to gain? Ziyara's golden eyes burned. The truth. Tsaran let out a bitter laugh. The truth. We already know the truth. The Empire won the war. Humans are extinct. That man, he's an anomaly. A survivor. A dead species clinging to life. Ziyara turned to him. Her voice was sharp. Then why do I feel like he's the one hunting us? Tsaran fell silent. Because deep down, he felt it too. The unspoken fear. That the Empire's greatest enemy had never truly fallen. That humanity had never stopped fighting. A dangerous lead. Ziara spent the next few days analyzing every piece of data she had. The battle footage, the recordings, the old war archives. Jack Carter was no ordinary soldier. He fought like he had been trained for war his entire life. His movements were too precise, his instincts too sharp. There were no official records of him in the Draven database. He shouldn't exist. But she knew where to look next. A hidden world. A place where outcasts and ghosts of war still whispered old names. A planet long forgotten by the Empire. Sigma 9. The journey into the void. Sigma 9 was a dead world. Once a thriving colony, now a wasteland. Draven forces had abandoned it after the war. Too many losses. Too many secrets buried beneath the rubble. But Ziara wasn't afraid of ghosts. Her ship slipped through the void of space, dodging old defense satellites that still drifted aimlessly. The planet's surface was cracked, littered with the wreckage of ships and ruined cities. Her team landed near an abandoned military base, one that had belonged to the humans before the war ended. As they stepped into the ruins, a strange silence filled the air. Surin's hand hovered near his plasma rifle. "I don't like this." Ziara ignored him. She pushed forward, searching for anything that might tell her the truth. And then, they found it. An old human command center, deep underground. The entrance was buried under rubble, but her team cleared it within minutes. Inside, everything was still intact. Flickering holograms, rusted weapons, and a single, working computer. Ziara's fingers danced across the console, activating the last transmission ever recorded. A grainy video flickered to life. And what she saw changed everything. The last message. The screen showed a human officer, a man with sharp eyes and a hardened face, dressed in an old military uniform. He spoke in a calm, controlled voice. "If you are seeing this, then the war is over. But not in the way you think. The Draven Empire believes it has won, but victory is a lie. The truth is far worse." Ziara leaned in, her breath shallow. The man's face was shadowed, but his words carried a weight she couldn't ignore. "We were never fighting to win. We were fighting to disappear, to make them think we were gone." Her blood ran cold. Humanity was never wiped out. We walked away from the war before they could understand what we were. Ziara felt a chill crawl up her spine. "And now, when the time is right, we will return." The message ended. A silence stretched through the darkened room. Then, a voice spoke from the shadows. "I told you that you were looking in the wrong place." Ziara's pulse spiked. She turned sharply, hand on her weapon. But it was too late. Jack Carter stood in the doorway, his blade already drawn. Her warriors reached for their weapons, but Jack didn't move. His eyes were locked onto hers. Cold, calculating, unstoppable. And this time, he wasn't alone. Figures moved behind him. More humans. More warriors. Ziara's throat tightened. Jack took a slow step forward. "Now tell me, Commander, do you still think your empire won the war?" The fall of the Dravens. The underground bunker was deathly silent. Commander Ziara stood frozen, her sharp eyes locked onto the impossible sight before her. Jack Carter wasn't alone. The lone human warrior, the myth, the ghost, the legend, had never been alone. In the shadows behind him, more figures emerged. Silent, armed, watching. And for the first time in her life, Ziara realized the truth. The Draven Empire had never truly won the war. Humanity had never been defeated. They had just been waiting. And now, the waiting was over. The face of the enemy. General Xirin stiffened beside her, his grip tightening on his plasma rifle. The air in the bunker had changed. A moment ago, they had been hunters. Now, they were prey. Ziara slowly exhaled, forcing herself to stay calm. She studied Jack Carter, noting the way he stood, relaxed, yet deadly, like a predator who had already won. She could feel the presence of the others behind him. More humans, more warriors, silent, calculating, trained for war. Ziara lifted her chin, refusing to show weakness. "How many of you are there?" she asked, her voice steady. Jack's expression remained unreadable. "Enough." The single word sent a chill down her spine. Enough for what? To fight back. To destroy the Empire. To win. The warning. Jack stepped forward, his boots echoing against the metallic floor. No fear, no hesitation. Ziara forced herself not to react. She had faced death before. She would not let this man see her flinch. He stopped just a few steps away, his piercing gaze locked onto hers. "This war isn't what you think it is, Commander." Ziara narrowed her eyes. "Then tell me what it is." Jack was silent for a moment. Then, slowly, he spoke. "The Dravens think they rule the galaxy, but you never really conquered humanity. You only thought you did." Ziara's heart pounded. "What are you saying?" Jack's expression darkened. "I'm saying that the real war is just beginning." Silence. The words hung heavy in the air. Ziara didn't know why, but she believed him. And that terrified her. The truth about humanity. Ziara needed answers. Now, her mind raced. The Empire's history claimed that humanity had been wiped out, that they were weak, that they had been crushed under the weight of Draven superiority. But what if that had never been true? What if humanity had never been defeated, but had simply disappeared? She clenched her fists. Why hide? If your kind survived, why not strike back? Jack tilted his head slightly. "Because we don't fight wars we can't win." The statement hit her like a hammer. Ziara had always believed that warriors fought until the end, no matter the cost. But this was different. This was strategy. Jack continued. "Your empire was too big, too strong. Fighting you head-on would have been suicide. So we did something else. We vanished. We let you believe we were gone. We let you think you won. We studied you. We learned your weaknesses, and we waited." Ziara's breath hitched. A cold realization crept over her. The Empire had been blind. For years, the Dravens had been expanding, conquering, growing, never realizing that something was watching from the shadows. And now, they were ready to strike. The fall begins. A sharp beep echoed from Ziara's wrist console. A transmission, urgent, from the Draven High Command. She hesitated, then tapped the screen. A grainy hologram appeared, revealing Supreme Commander Virex, the highest-ranking leader of the Draven Empire. His face was grim. "Ziara, if you're receiving this, return immediately. The Empire is under attack." Ziara's blood ran cold. Unknown forces are hitting key military outposts. They are not Draven. They are using tactics we've never seen before. The signal glitched, static cutting through his voice. Ziara felt dread twist in her gut. Jack Carter didn't move. He didn't have to. She already knew who was attacking. Humans. And it had already begun. The end of an empire. Ziara turned to Jack, searching his face for any sign of hesitation. There was none. "This is you, isn't it? Your people." Jack didn't deny it. "This isn't revenge, Commander. It's survival." Ziara clenched her jaw. "And if I try to stop you?" Jack's expression was unreadable, but his voice was deadly serious. "Then you'll fall with the rest of them." The weight of his words pressed down on her. Ziara had spent her entire life believing in the strength of the Empire. Now, for the first time, she wasn't sure it would survive. A choice that will change the galaxy. Ziara stood at a crossroads. If she returned to the Empire, she would be forced to fight against the humans. But if Jack was telling the truth, then she was fighting for a losing side. She took a deep breath, then met Jack's gaze. "I need to see it for myself. The truth. If your kind really survived, then show me." Jack studied her for a long moment. Then finally, he gave a small nod. "Then come with me. But once you do, there's no going back." Ziara knew that. But she also knew she had to make a choice. For the first time in her life, she didn't know if the Empire would still exist tomorrow. And for the first time in her life, she wasn't sure if she wanted it to. The war begins. The vast emptiness of space stretched before Commander Zayara, but her mind was anything but still. She stood aboard Jack Carter's stealth ship, a human vessel unlike anything she had ever seen before. Sleek, fast, built for precision warfare. It wasn't bulky like Draven warships, which relied on size and raw power. It was designed for something else. Hunting. Her golden eyes flicked to the viewport as the ship sped toward an unknown destination. Behind her, a dozen human warriors moved in silence, checking weapons, calibrating gear, speaking in low voices. They were calm, focused, unafraid, because they knew what was coming. The war had begun, and Zayara had just left everything she had ever known behind. The fall of Draven strongholds. The Empire's might had never been challenged, until now. The Draven homeworld was in chaos. Reports flooded in from every sector. Military outposts destroyed overnight. War fleets vanished without a trace. Entire planetary defenses shut down from the inside. No one had seen the enemy. No one had detected their movements. Because the humans had spent decades preparing for this moment, they didn't attack like an invading army. They struck like predators, silent, precise, unstoppable. The commander's dilemma. Zayara stood in the war room of the human ship, surrounded by holographic projections of burning Draven worlds. She felt something she had never felt before. Doubt. For her entire life, she had believed the Empire was unbreakable. She had believed in its strength. Now, she saw the cracks. She turned to Jack Carter, who stood with his arms crossed, watching her. His face was unreadable, cold, calculating. He had spent years waiting for this, and now it was happening. "You're not fighting a war," Zayara said finally. "You're dismantling an empire." Jack didn't deny it. "That's the only way to win." Zayara's jaw clenched. "You're killing thousands." Jack met her gaze. "The Dravens did the same to us. For centuries." Zayara had no response, because deep down, she knew he was right. The Dravens had spent their existence conquering, enslaving, wiping out species who resisted them. Now, for the first time, they were on the receiving end. And they weren't prepared. The real battle begins. An alarm blared through the ship. Zayara's instincts kicked in. She turned sharply as one of the human officers spoke. "Draven fleet detected. 6 warships. They're moving toward the capital." Zayara's pulse quickened. Her people were making their last stand. Jack glanced at the hologram, then at Zayara. "It's time." Zayara's heart pounded. She had to make a choice. Go back to her people and fight for a doomed empire, or stand with the humans and watch the empire burn. The fall of the capital. The human fleet dropped out of hyperspace above Dravis Prime, the capital of the empire. Zayara couldn't breathe. She had seen war before, but never like this. Human warships didn't just attack. They infiltrated. Electronic warfare disabled planetary defenses. Shadow teams landed behind enemy lines, eliminating leadership before they even knew they were under attack. Precision orbital strikes targeted key infrastructure, crippling the Empire in hours. Dravis Prime was falling. Not in months. Not in weeks. In a single night. The last stand. Zayara stood on the bridge, watching as Draven warships burned. She clenched her fists. She had trained her entire life for war. But now, she didn't know which side she was on. Her communicator crackled. A familiar voice filled the air. "Supreme Commander Virex. Zayara, if you're still out there, the Empire needs you." Her heart twisted. She had served the Empire her whole life. But now, she had seen the truth. The Dravens weren't the superior race. They were the villains of history. And now, They were losing. The unthinkable choice. Jack Carter turned to her. His voice was calm. "It's over, Commander. The Empire's finished." Ziyara knew he was right. But she still had a choice to make. She could stand with her people, or she could step into a new future. She took a slow breath. Her next words would define the fate of the galaxy. And finally, she spoke. The legend of the last human warrior. Commander Ziyara stood on the edge of history. The Draven Empire, once an unstoppable force, was burning. Its fleets were shattered. Its strongholds had fallen. The capital, Dravis Prime, was under siege, its skies lit with fire as human warships struck with terrifying precision. Ziyara had fought in 100 battles, but she had never seen a war end like this. Not in months. Not in years. In a single night, her communicator crackled again, the voice of Supreme Commander Virex. "Ziyara, if you are still loyal to the Empire, return at once. We must regroup. We can still fight." She stared at the blinking light on her console. Fight. There was no war left to fight, because this wasn't a war. This was extinction. And for the first time, she understood something terrifying. The Dravens had never truly won, and humanity had never truly lost. The final decision. Ziyara turned away from the console, her golden eyes locking onto Jack Carter. The human warrior stood on the bridge of his ship, arms crossed, his face calm despite the destruction unfolding across the stars. His fleet moved like shadows, silent and deadly. Her mind raced. The Empire had spent decades believing in its own superiority, believing humans were weak, scattered, and defeated. But it had all been a lie. Jack had told her the truth. "We never fought to win. We fought to disappear. We let you believe you won. And now, we've come back." She clenched her fists. For years, she had fought for a cause she believed in. But now, she wasn't sure if the Draven Empire deserved to survive. Jack took a slow step forward. His voice was calm, but firm. "You don't owe them anything, Commander. You've seen what they are, what they've done. But you can choose something different." Ziyara's pulse pounded. Everything in her life had led to this moment. One choice, one future. Would she fight for a dying empire, or step into the unknown? The Empire's last breath. A massive explosion rocked the planet below. Ziyara watched as the Imperial Palace, once the seat of Draven power, collapsed in on itself, reduced to rubble in seconds. Dravis Prime had fallen. The war was over. The Empire was no more. And with it, everything Ziyara had ever known. She closed her eyes, breathed deep. Then, slowly, she turned to Jack and nodded. "I'm with you." Jack gave no reaction, no celebration, just a simple reply. "Then welcome to the Resistance." The truth of humanity. The surviving Draven generals flood into deep space, scattered and broken. Some would become warlords, clinging to scraps of power. Others would vanish, trying to rebuild what had been lost. But Ziyara knew the truth. The Draven Empire was finished. The galaxy had a new power now. Humanity had returned, not as conquerors, not as invaders, but as something far more dangerous. The legends whispered of their return, of warriors who had disappeared into the void, only to rise from the shadows when the time was right. They were no longer myths. They were no longer ghosts. They were the future. A new beginning. Ziyara stared out at the endless stars, the weight of her choice settling in. For the first time, she wasn't following orders. For the first time, she was choosing her own path. And that path led her to humanity. Jack Carter stepped beside her, his voice low. "We have work to do." Ziyara gave a small smirk. "Then let's get started." And with that, the last remnant of the Draven Empire stepped forward into the unknown.